Now, Mr. Tharoor, India has been for years renaming cities. So, Calcutta became Kolkata, Madras became Chennai. But just by changing some signboards, can India really move away from its past?
Well, actually, this is something which had opposed at the time. I remember writing a very angry article in the 90s when Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras became Mumbai, Kolkata, and Chennai, not because I had any particular attachment to the colonial era, but because I said we're missing out on this entire 20th century concept of branding. These are brands that have some value, that have been built up over centuries. You're destroying the brand value. Madras was attached to a very popular fabric of bleeding Madras. The name was in various people's minds for various products, ranging from curry to clothing. Calcutta had a certain resonance. There was even a play that had nothing to do with Calcutta called Oh Calcutta. That was a big success in the West End. Bombay, again, there's so many things from Bombay duck to Bombay tea to Bombay, everything else. I mean, these were brands that had some value. I said, why are you jettisoning it? And I sort of rather irritatedly said, those who cannot create have arrogated to themselves the power to rename, which was perhaps unduly nasty. I'll tell you why I was perhaps being a bit unfair is there is a certain legitimate desire to reclaim our names that were changed only because the British couldn't pronounce them. And the feeling was, why should we go along with what they have done to our nomenclature? I'll give you a couple of examples. And here is where you have to juggle between pride, cultural authenticity, and practicality. So on the one hand, you've got things like a place is called Pune. For some reason, the British called it Pune. Now, do we have to say Pune when everyone knows it's Pune? What's so difficult about saying Pune, right? Kanpur. They would say Kaunpur, and they spelt it that way too. Now, why should you say Kaunpur if the name is Kanpur? I just say, so let's balance our own pride with some practical considerations also. But the truth is, it has a certain appeal. And, I must admit that sometimes we rename cities for good reasons. I would say when Port Blair was renamed Sri Vijayapura, many people said, why is everyone knows Port Blair? What is the Sri Vijayapura, etc.? The thing is, who was Blair? Was it somebody who mattered? Was his colonial legacy? He was apparently the first young British surveyor who surveyed that area of the Andamans. Right. Do we need to recall his name in the name of a city? I mean, if necessary, you can have a plaque somewhere saying the first survey was done by Captain whatever, Archibald Blair or whatever. But to call the entire place, I don't see any harm in going back to an ancient name, which was, in fact, a name that was used in that region by the kings of that era, and call it Sri Vijayapura. That's easy for Indians to pronounce, and it's part of our history, so I don't object to that. Madras and Chennai you can quarrel about, because the funny thing is that there is a tradition around the world, now if you just go larger than India, where in different languages the same place can have different names. The Germans call their country Deutschland. In English we call it Germany. In French they call it Allemagne. Each country has a different name for the country. The Germans are not going around saying, we object, you have to say Deutschland in English. Why can't we have had a situation where when speaking English you say Madras, and speaking Tamil you say Chennai? What is the problem? To my mind, there is a certain sort of inferiority complex implicit in insisting that my language and my name and my system must be something everybody else uses.
One name that has the internet go bonkers is Bharat. Sashi, where do you stand there?
That's where I absolutely insist. When I speak in Hindi or Malayalam, I say Bharat. And when I speak in English, I say India. Not just because of the branding, but because I believe it makes no sense to attempt to say Bharat in English. Have you seen a Westerner pronounce Bharat, by the way? It comes out as Bharat. I mean, it's absurd. It almost insults my country to have it being called Bharat. I would rather it be called India, which is a name that has been around for more than 2,000 years. How did India come about? It comes about from the same way the word Hindu came about. So the very people who are proud of being Hindu and are ashamed of being Indian should get their heads examined. Where is the root? The blessed Persians couldn't pronounce the letter S. So the river Sindhu, right, was the big barrier that many conquerors and migrants and so on found a challenge to cross. So the people east of the Sindhu, they called the Hindus because they couldn't say the S. So it became the Indu and became. The Greeks got the name from the Persians because the Greeks and the Persians, of course, remember Alexander Macedonia coming all that way, etc. Those guys started saying Indus because the Greek Roman endings of US at the end of things, they took the Ind and they made it Indus. So in English, it became Indus. Everything east of the Indus became India. Now, for 2,000 years, in all the Western languages, Western maps, Western writings, India was this fabled land of riches, of glory, of culture, a desirable place to go to. It became such a wonderful concept that in the Arabic language, Hind is actually a word associated with beauty. There are girls even today named Hind to convey that they are going to be beautiful. Babies are called Hind. That was the association that India and Hind conveyed. Now, why would I sit around today and in the interests of my nationalist authenticity, throw away the value of a 2,000-year-old name with wonderfully positive associations? It's not as if it had anything negative. India was considered a wonderful place, a place of glory, of riches, of prosperity, and of beauty. Why would I throw that away in order to serve myself? When I speak in my own language, it happens to be the name of my country in my language, like the way the Germans say Deutschland when they speak German. I will say Bharat. But when I'm speaking in English, I don't want to give up all the benefits I get from the hearer's ears and his or her mind by saying India.
Now, Dadabhai Nairoji, he argued that British Indian civil service, it drained India's wealth by excluding Indians. And since the empire was responsible for shaping some of these systems, how much of the colonial legacy do you think still affects us, Shashi?
Well, first of all, on the British Indian civil service, I think it was Nehruji who said it's neither Indian nor civil nor a service. If he didn't say it, I wish he had, because I certainly agree with him completely on that. It reminded me of that famous crack about the Holy Roman Empire, neither holy nor Roman nor the empire. That's exactly what it was. It was really not Indian. They kept Indians out right till 1868, and even then very grudgingly admitted very few. It wasn't civil. They were deeply uncivil, arrogant, tyrannical in their rule, distant from the people, and really oppressive in their conduct. And they were not a service. Their job was not to serve. Their job was to extract and exploit. So what they would do, for example, the district magistrate, as we would call them today, were called collectors. Why? Because their job was to collect as much as they could of revenue and other resources from the places they controlled. That's what the service is all about. They were grossly overpaid by Indian tax money. Indian revenues paid their salaries, their extravagant home leaves every year, their absences, and their very early retirements and pensions. Just 20 years of service, you could retire to a very comfortable estate in England, earning money that the Indian taxpayer was paying. I have written about this in detail, so you can get some of the details from my book, Inglorious Empire, but I can tell you that the injustice of the system was apparent even to some of the British as early as the first half of the 19th century. They were talking about how unjust it was. But when Queen Victoria became Empress of India and issued her famous proclamation in which she said they were going to govern India for the benefit of the Indians, they actually declared that Indians could join the Indian civil service, and they threw open the examinations for Indians. What was interesting was, number one, very few Indians were allowed to get in because there was also an interview. Oh, well, you did in the written examination. In the interview, very few people could cross the hurdles. So I think the first 30 years are like 6 or 7 Indians who made it, and every one of them was either given completely insignificant postings, really, really trivial postings in rural districts, or were treated so badly that they either left the service, like Surendranath Banerjee resigned, or they committed suicide. The case of a man called Chetty, who was British educated, went to school and Oxford University, came back in the civil service thinking he was going to be part of the glory of the empire, and he was treated so humiliatingly. All the real decisions were being made in the clubs, but he was excluded from the clubs because he was not white. And the poor man shot himself. However, when independence came, we chose to retain it. Why? We had just gone through the trauma of partition, these centuries of divide and rule by the British. We had seen the country fragmented, the flames of partition, the violence, the murder, the killings that accompanied searing the land. Was that a time to dismantle the administrative apparatus? So Sardar Patel, who the man who created India's unity, and Jawaharlal Nehru and others talked about this. Nehru actually was very anti-ICS. He wanted to disband it. But Patel Sahab said, listen, this has been the steel frame of the British Raj. Do we not need a steel frame to keep the Indian Union together at this time? And Nehruji and others agreed. Patel Sahab was right. Sardar Patel was right. So he converted the Indian civil service into the Indian administrative service with, unfortunately, much of the same roles, the same kind of attitude to power, the same kind of training as late as the 1960s. If you joined the IAS, you had to learn horse riding. And when asked why, then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi herself said, a man who can control a horse can control a mob. That was still the attitude. So these Indians came to the administrative service. The accent changed, but the attitude did not change, and the arrogance in many cases did not change.